Trust.com.
America's Voice Live, America's fastest growing news program. With Steve Gruber.
You've got to put America first. You do that by voting and bringing your friends to do the same.
Delivering the latest news, observations, and opinions. With the entire Real America's Voice team, America's Voice Live starts now.
Welcome to America's Voice Live. I'm Terrence Bates in for Steve Gruber. It is Friday, August 25th. Steve had to deal with some strong storms in Michigan that produced a tornado and brought down power for a good chunk of the state. He will be back on Monday, but in the meantime, I'm going to be sitting in for him. So let's get right to today's top stories. President Trump's mugshot after being arrested in Georgia is what everyone is talking about. We'll have more on the latest case against the 45th president from the Trump attorney Christina Bobb. Also, the abortion debate rages on in the Republican Party. How will some of the other presidential candidates handle it going forward? And then later, almost 2 years after the COVID-19 lockdowns that imploded the U.S. economy, mask mandates are coming back. TPUSA correspondent Morgan McMichael will join us with that story. But we begin with an historic moment in the nation's history, and not necessarily the good kind. President Trump arrived at the Fulton County Jail last night to turn himself in after his indictment by a grand jury in Fulton County DA Fani Willis. You're seeing exclusive video from Real America's Voice cameras of President Trump's motorcade arriving at the jail yesterday evening. Trump also had a message to share after turning himself in.
I really believe this is a very sad day for America. This should never happen. If you challenge an election, you should be able to challenge an election. I thought the election was a rigged election, a stolen election, and I should have every right to do that. As you know, you have many people that you've been watching over the years do the same thing, whether it's Hillary Clinton or Stacey Abrams or many others. When you have that great freedom to challenge, you have to be able to, otherwise you're going to have very dishonest elections. What has taken place here is a travesty of justice. We did nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong. And everybody knows it. I've never had such support. And that goes with the other ones, too. What they're doing is election interference. They're trying to interfere with an election. There's never been anything like it in our country before. This is their way of campaigning. And this is one instance, but you have three other instances. It's election interference. So I want to thank you for being here. We did nothing wrong at all. And we have every right, every single right, to challenge an election that we think is dishonest, that we think is very dishonest. So thank you all very much, and I'll see you very soon. Thank you.
The 45th president also released a statement on his X account, formerly known as Twitter, marking his first post on that platform in almost 3 years. It included his mugshot that was taken at the Fulton County Jail, as well as the message, "Election interference, never surrender, DonaldJTrump.com." It seems Mr. Trump and his campaign are at least trying to make the most of this situation. His supporters also standing firmly behind him.
Which one are you in, though? Talking about they got everybody.
Many lawyers and legal analysts are sharing their opinions on this latest indictment, including Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch, who says this all violates all sorts of constitutional amendments.
This is an attack on the First Amendment, the 12th Amendment, right? That's the amendment that guides how our elections are supposed to be run. The 14th Amendment. The Sixth Amendment, they're trying to outlaw legal advice. If you get legal advice they don't like, they want to put the lawyers in jail. And what they're effectively trying to do is freeze the presidential campaign of President Trump and the entire Republican Party, because effectively, when you read this indictment, when you look at what the Justice Department, the Biden regime is arguing, they're saying any communication effectively that President Trump might have with anyone about any of these issues could be subject to scrutiny by a criminal court, and he may have to answer.
Joining me now to discuss all of this and more is Trump attorney and author of the book Stealing Your Vote, Christina Bobb. Christina, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Terrence. Thanks for having me.
It really isn't a good afternoon, but it's how we typically greet each other, so we'll go with that. Guys, let's put up that picture of President Trump, the mugshot. Christina, I know you've seen it ad nauseum, but your gut feeling when you see this, what's kind of the initial reaction?
My initial reaction is not only is President Trump fired up to fight this fight, but I think that picture fires up a lot of people. I know, we've been talking about indictments and we've been talking about the criminalization of political opposition for quite some time now, but now we have a picture that embodies it. And the first time I saw that mugshot, it struck a nerve in me in a way that the pleadings haven't. The words on the page haven't. A picture can really move people, and I think that that's what that picture does. I think it lets America know he's not surrendering, he's not rolling over, he's going to fight this fight, he's going to come through, and so should we.
Is the face we saw in that picture one of anger or one of determination?
I think it's determination. I mean, I think he's angry too, but more than anything, he's resolute. He is resolute to save this country, and he is determined to do everything he can. He's going through hell for this country, but he's doing it because he believes that America can be saved, America will be saved, and that he's one that can do it. He might be the only one that can do it collectively with the rest of us. Obviously, he needs all of us to support him and support the cause and cleaning up elections and doing our part, but he's absolutely the leader of this, and he's prepared to do it. Obviously,
there's an argument to be made that all of this is politicized, but it also seems personal. Mugshotting a former president, it seems like it's almost an attempt to shame him.
It is. I mean, there are jackals, gloating over the lion saying, look, we got him, we got him. They don't have him. They don't have any of the others that they indicted either. I don't expect anybody to actually get convicted on any of these charges. I don't expect these charges as they currently stand to even go to trial. I think it's likely that they'll get removed to federal court. Fani Willis played her card. She was the puppet for Jack Smith to try to bring this to create additional problems for Donald Trump. It's going to backfire quickly. And I don't think it's going to stick. But to your point, they're just a bunch of jackals.
Obviously, there's a push from the prosecution, from Fani Willis and the DA's office there in Fulton County to get this into a courtroom as quickly as possible. They're talking like the beginning of the year. You say you don't expect that to happen. It may not even make it to court. How long do you think all of this will ultimately be litigated?
Well, I expect most of it to be thrown out or disposed of, in some way other than trial, several before the election, certainly. None of these cases, especially this Georgia case, I don't think it has any legs to stand on. I don't think this Georgia case will make it to the election. The others, we'll see. We've got a hearing on Monday in the January 6th case in Washington, D.C. for the court to issue her scheduling order. I would expect her to set trial out for about a year from now, and then whether it gets continued or not, depending on the pace of discovery, we'll see how it goes. But I think for now we should look ahead for about a year, if not sooner, meaning President Trump successfully gets rid of the cases. Mm-hmm.
You're obviously just a part of the president's legal team. Obviously, there are a number of lawyers on retainer since there are so many different cases. I'll put into perspective for us, though, kind of as part of this broader legal team, the challenges and how thin you guys are being spread because there are so many cases, even though there is an army of you.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what they're trying to do, right? If they're not indicting us, then they're working us to death by trying to make sure that we don't have enough bandwidth to handle the cases that they bring. Ultimately, that's backfiring. I don't think that's a successful strategy, but they're absolutely going after not just Trump attorneys, but they're going after conservative lawyers. I mean, there's a whole movement to try to disbar conservative attorneys or throw them in jail. Michigan is going after the lawyers that challenged the election in Michigan for 2020, as well as the electors. They want to make sure that not only do Americans not have a voice, but that we don't have legal representation when they try to take us to court. That is their play here.
Christina, I'm glad you brought that up, because that is such an interesting kind of development, if you will, or strategy. It seems that lawyers are now being targeted for simply offering legal advice to do their job.
They are. They do not want any other opinion other than theirs. And the biggest weapon or the biggest foe in this fight is a lawyer armed with the law and good arguments to oppose their dictates. They don't want any opposition, and they need to get rid of any lawyer who's willing to stand up against them. And that's what they're trying to do.
Does that frighten you as an attorney, that there's this sort of attack on your profession and this sort of attack on the fundamental tenets of your job?
I think fear is a choice I am yet to make, but yes, It's something that I think I'm keenly aware of. Unfortunately, I've been thrown into fights myself over just my ability to exist as an attorney. So it's something that we're all aware of, but I think we keep our noses clean, our heads down, and keep moving forward. I think we'll eventually be successful.
Obviously, President Trump is the face of all of this. He is the one having to shoulder the shaming, if you will. What's his state of mind like? How is he doing these days?
He's incredible. I've honestly never met anybody like him. He is so resolved and so resolute. I mean, I thought the Tucker interview, for those that watched it on debate night, was a really good representation of how he is, how he carries himself all the time. He is not fazed by any of this. Tucker even asked him and said, how do you do all this? And he said, the people get it. They know. And when I talk to him as well, that's the same way he responds. It's like, everybody knows that these are bogus charges. They're not real. We just have to keep going forward. So he's resolute. He's in good spirits. He's determined to save America, and I think he will.
While obviously he wants to save America, one has to believe that it's taking a toll, that all of this these attacks are going to impact his, for lack of a better word, his faith in the current system. Obviously, he wants to get back in office to overhaul it, but it seems to me that one might lose some faith in the current system. Well,
I think that's why he ran for office in the first place. I think he doesn't have faith in the system, and he knows that it's salvageable, and he's one of maybe the only person who is capable and willing to do what needs to be done to salvage it. So I think the whole reason he started this was because he lost faith in the way our country was being run. And he proved for 4 years that he's capable of restoring America. And he even says himself now he didn't know how deep the swamp went, but he certainly does now. And you better believe Trump 2.0 is going to be a whole different story.
Well, fortunately, he's wading through the swamp and not drowning in it. Christina Bobb, always good to talk to you. We appreciate you being here.
Thanks, Terrence.
All right. Coming up after the break, how did the GOP candidates fare on the topic of abortion during the debates? We'll have a discussion about that coming up. Welcome back to America's Voice Live. I'm Terrence Bates. The right to life under a 2024 presidency is coming into question, along with the actual likelihood of a federal abortion ban. All of that is based on responses from Republican candidates at Wednesday's primary debate hosted by Fox News. Here's Nikki Haley's response to whether or not she would sign a federal abortion ban.
When it comes to a federal ban, let's be honest with the American people and say it will take 60 Senate votes. It will take a majority of the House. So in order to do that, let's find consensus. Can't we all agree that we should ban late-term abortions? Can't we all agree that we should encourage adoptions? Can't we all agree that doctors and nurses who don't believe in abortion shouldn't have to perform them? Can't we all agree that contraception should be available? And can't we all agree that we are not going to put a woman in jail or give her the death penalty if she gets an abortion? Let's treat this like a respectful issue that it is and humanize the situation and stop demonizing the situation.
A 15-week limit seemed to be the popular legislative choice of other candidates like Mike Pence and Tim Scott when asked that very same question.
When the Supreme Court returned this question to the American people, they didn't just send it to the states only. It's not a states-only issue, it's a moral issue. And I promise you, as President of the United States, the American people will have a champion for life in the Oval Office. Can't we have a minimum standard in every state in the nation that says when a baby is capable of feeling pain, an abortion cannot be allowed? A 15-week ban is an idea whose time has come. It's supported by 70% of the American people.
We cannot let states like California, New York, and Illinois have abortions on demand up until the day of birth. That is immoral. It is unethical. It is wrong. We must have a president of the United States who will advocate and fight for, at the minimum, a 15-week limit.
Meanwhile, it seems that Governor Ron DeSantis plans on leaving the decision to the state, although he did tell Fox News that he stands on the side of life.
We're better than what the Democrats are selling. We are not going to allow abortion all the way up till birth, and we will hold them accountable for their extremism.
But just to be clear, Governor, would you sign a 6-week ban federally?
I'm going to stand on the side of life. Look, I understand Wisconsin is going to do it different than Texas. I understand Iowa and New Hampshire are going to do different. But I will support the cause of life as governor and as president.
Vice President Pence, you're shaking your head.
We must have a national...
Hold on, Senator.
Joining us live now to discuss is the CEO of pro-life group 40 Days for Life, Sean Carney. Sean, so good to see you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, so we heard from a lot of the candidates there. Is there any candidate whose response moved you in any way or whose response you found reasonable?
Tim Scott. I thought Tim Scott did good. Everybody else did horrible. Nikki Haley's comment was very powerful and profound, but said nothing, and it was not very substantive at all. And it was very accusatory too. There is one side of this issue that is humanized abortion. It is the pro-life side, as we have, a record number of free pregnancy medical centers open in our country. They outnumber abortion providers 5 to 1. The humanization of the issue is being done by the pro-life movement. I don't know anybody who wants to give a woman the death penalty for having an abortion. I don't know why she said that. Her comment was awful. And the 15-week ban is not good. They are going to lose the pro-life constituency. You are going to have a lot of no-show voters if that's the consensus. The other thing that they're doing is coming at it from a disposition as if we're losing. None of them congratulated the Supreme Court for dragging us out of 1973. None of them quoted Alito's brilliant opinion overturning Roe v. Wade, and they just didn't overturn Roe v. Wade. They beat it to death with a baseball bat because it was bad law, in Ginsburg's own words. And they just came at it like they were sort of apologizing that we're in this new era. And it's a great thing. 23 states right now are essentially abortion-free, have strong bans. They didn't acknowledge that. And even Martha McCallum, when she introduced the question, she said that we're losing state to state. That's not true. We are winning state to state. And there was a big disconnect between Republicans at the state level and the ones running for president big time on that issue.
Sean, so I'm curious then, from a 40 days for life perspective, should there be a federal ban on abortions, or is this an issue that should be decided at the state level?
I think it's inevitable that there will be a national ban, and that they're asking the presidential candidates. That would require Americans, us. We would have to put people in Congress. We'd have to put people in the Senate. We have only dehumanized a segment of our population once before in our nation with Dred Scott. And it didn't work when you had one state where you're a human being with protection under the law and another state where you're the property of another. We're not going to get away with that kind of schizophrenia in a post-Roe world. And now that the comfort of Roe v. Wade is gone, right now, you are legally protected in Texas and in Florida and in Alabama and Tennessee, and you can be discarded in California, New York, or Illinois. That's not a sustainable model. It won't work. It didn't work with slavery. And they need to articulate that and make it such a positive issue. I mean, all the Democrats are advocating for abortion at 40 weeks. To me, this issue should be easy going into the general election.
All of the polling on this issue says that a majority of Americans are in favor of some sort of abortion. However restrictive, I guess that's where the debate is. Is that where you see the debate?
No, I think that the polls leadership is going to have to follow the polls. You see the same thing that Trump did in 2016 with immigration. You see how great Trump was for the pro-life movement when he debated Hillary. I mean, that was fantastic. He won the pro-life movement with that one debate. And I think that there's a lack of being able to articulate it. But when there was some stat that 70% of Americans don't agree with the overturning of Roe versus Wade, it's just completely bogus when you get into those polls and see how the questions were asked. Most Americans are pro-life. Very, very few Americans want late-term abortion or partial birth abortion. The majority of abortions are done in the first trimester, and that's why these heartbeat bills have been so effective at closing abortion facilities and, as a result, saving babies.
I'm listening to you, and I fully understand your point, but I quite honestly, it seems like there's a bit of a disconnect in terms of late-term abortions, which you are absolutely right. Most Americans are absolutely opposed to that. But to your point, abortions early on in the pregnancy, there's a good number of Americans who do support that. And I would imagine that your organization is just against abortions in general.
Yeah, absolutely. And the only reason people support first trimester abortions is because it makes them feel better than at 16 weeks or 18 weeks or 25 weeks. But there's nothing scientifically or morally that changes at 14 weeks and 6 days to make you not worthy of life as opposed to 15 weeks. You're 24 hours from getting dignity. You're 24 hours from getting protection under the law in the United States. It's a shameful approach. It's inconsistent, and it's not based on science. That's the beauty of the pro-life movement, is that we don't gain dignity or value over time like a mutual fund. We simply are. We simply come into existence at conception and therefore deserve protection under the law. And I think that inconsistency is what is inevitably going to lead to some kind of national debate or national ban on some level.
Yeah, because the debate is underway. Absolutely. Mr. Carney, always good to see you. Appreciate you being here with us today. This was a good one. I put some things in my mind there. I like it. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Coming up after the break, Representative Jim Jordan launching an examination of Donald Trump's Fulton County indictment. We'll take a closer look at the investigations. That's next here on AVL. City, Charlotte, North Carolina. Welcome back, everyone. House Judiciary Chairman Jim Jordan is launching a probe into the Fulton County District Attorney's indictment of President Donald Trump. Jordan says the timing and motivation of the indictment from Fani Willis raises some serious questions. He notes 4 days before the indictment, Willis launched a new campaign fundraising website that highlights the investigation into Trump. He also points out the media appearances that the grand jury foreperson made earlier this year, in which she expressed excitement over the idea of subpoenaing and swearing in the former president. Also under scrutiny, the list of criminal charges that were released hours before the grand jury voted on them. Jordan says the timing is questionable at best. He also is looking to get to the bottom of why Willis's office opened the investigation in February of 2021, yet charges weren't brought for 2.5 years, and just as the 2024 presidential campaign is getting into full swing. Jordan has requested that all relevant documents be turned into the House Judiciary Committee by next month, September 7th, to be exact. Government watchdog group Foundation for Government Accountability is reporting that the Biden administration's efforts to increase food stamp benefits by more than $1 trillion is likely behind the 15% increase in grocery prices. Spending on the program doubled between 2019 and 2022 from $4.5 billion to $11 billion. An additional 5.8% increase is expected this year. In 2021, the Department of Agriculture expanded the program by 27% through revised nutritional standards for food stamps. The watchdog group estimates that $193 billion could be clawed back if lawmakers repeal the food stamp expansion. We'll get back to the news of the day after this quick break and this message from our sponsor, Birch Gold. As central banks in countries like China, India, and Australia begin transforming to a digital currency, the Federal Reserve has been contemplating the very same thing. With a digital currency, the government could track every single purchase you make. Officials could even prohibit you from purchasing certain products, or they could easily freeze or seize part or all of your money. These are just some of the reasons concerned Americans are reaching out to the Birch Gold Group. They really want to have a physical asset that's independent of the U.S. dollar. And gold held in tax-sheltered retirement accounts may be just the thing for you. So learn if gold is right for you simply by texting the word America to the number 989898, and they'll send you a free information kit on gold. With an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, thousands of satisfied customers, countless 5-star reviews, Birch Gold has been helping many listeners just like you from the very beginning. So again, text the word America to the number 989898 and claim your free information kit on gold, because if a central bank digital currency becomes a reality, it'll be nice to have a little bit of gold on hand. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, history seems to be repeating itself as new mask mandates are coming back. So is anyone else having deja vu? Morgan McMichael will join us here later on to talk more about that. That's next on AVL. There she is. Give us a wave. Welcome back to America's Voice Live. Almost 2 years after the COVID-19 lockdowns imploded the U.S. economy, mask mandates are making a comeback. The mainstream media has begun ramping up fears surrounding an uptick in the new COVID-19 variant B286. Last week, NBC News was the first to report that COVID is making a comeback.
COVID is making a comeback this summer, so many of us would like to leave it in the past, but cases are once again on the rise. So when will new booster shots roll out?
The broadcast came as a White House official said the Biden administration plans to urge all Americans to get a booster shot for the coronavirus this autumn to counter a new wave of infections. Recently, both college campuses and a Hollywood studio re-implemented mask mandates. Joining us now is TPUSA correspondent Morgan McMichael to talk more about this. Morgan, what are you hearing? I know you travel around college campuses and talk to students. What is the reaction that you're hearing from many of these students about this possibility of having to wear a mask again soon?
I mean, the mask mandates, first of all, were ridiculous, and it caused students to not even be allowed to go to class. They were being socially and physically distanced in the classrooms, and it resulted in Gen Z having a far worse college education over the past 3 years than we've ever seen before. And so what I've been seeing is a lot of students are pushing back because they don't want to wear masks anymore. But this small university in Atlanta, they're the ones that reinstated this mask mandate for 2 weeks, and they're also instating required physical distancing. And then the studio in LA is Lionsgate, where they reinstated their mask mandate. And I fear that we're going to see a lot of these more liberal-leaning states and cities implementing these kind of mandates. And what we're going to see, I think this is why we need to move towards a parallel economy, is because a lot of these liberal-owned businesses are going to start falling for what the administration is putting out when it comes to these new COVID restrictions.
And it seems
but really, I want.
Go ahead. You were going to say.
Oh, what happened to the flu season? We used to come to the fall, everyone would get a little cold, get sick during the fall time and the changing of the seasons. But now COVID is the new flu.
No, it is. And it seems that it all starts with the mask. The mask is just the entree to even more restrictions and more requirements of Americans.
Absolutely. I mean, at first it's the mask, then they told us to get vaccinated, then the vaccine passports. What's next? Are they going to have us have to show a QR code to even enter a store? It's becoming very dystopian and very deja vu, like we already did this in 2020, and if it worked, why do we have to do it again?
You know, it's so funny that some of these universities, and in this one case you were talking about the film studio, are going back to masks because it seems like there's kind of this broad opinion now and this broad composure, if you will, that we are now beyond COVID. You know, even you see the hand washing stations there, and the you know, in the mall. None of them have any actual liquid in them, that kind of thing. So it seems like broadly, most Americans are over COVID.
I think most Americans are completely over COVID and are no longer concerned with it at all. I mean, as long as you're stocking up on your vitamins, you're eating healthy, and you're taking care of your body, I think a majority of Americans will be completely fine as we see this new wave of what I think is just a light flu. I know they're saying there's a new COVID variant out, but I think people are taking this way too far, and the government is possibly using this as a control method. I mean, the mask mandates are seemingly coming back, and who knows when it's going to be more widespread.
And it starts with the mask. The next thing you know, and they're already talking about it. Oh, well, there's a whole nother vaccination or vaccine that we want you to take, all of that. It's a slippery slope.
It's a very slippery slope, and we'll see how the government continues to try and control its American people. But I think there's enough of us that are fed up with COVID and being lied to by the government, and we'll continue to push back and tell them, nope, we're not going to comply with this anymore.
Morgan, we appreciate your time. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. Coming up after the break, we're going to tell you how you can make a difference to advance conservative values right now in America. Stay tuned. Robert Charles will join us next, too, on America's Voice Live. back, everyone. Chicago White Sox chairman Jerry Reinsdorf is contemplating moving the baseball team away from Chicago. The Sox's lease at Guaranteed Rate Field expires in 6 years, and sources say Reinsdorf is weighing the possibility of moving the franchise outside the city limits to the suburbs or even to Nashville. The White Sox moved into their new stadium in 1991 and have resided in Chicago since 1901. The 87-year-old Reinsdorf, with a limited partnership group, purchased the Sox in 1981 for $19 million, whose current market value is now nearly $2 billion. This season, the Sox held a 49-75 record. USA Today reported the White Sox failed to win a single postseason series since 2005 and have won just 3 playoff games and produced only 6 winning seasons since 2006. Attendance has plummeted this year, dropping by 179,836 fans, averaging just 21,598 people a game, which is half of their record attendance of 47,754 in 2016. The White Sox are in the midst of a restructuring as 2 high-ranking officials, Executive Vice President Ken Williams and Senior Vice President and General Manager Rich Hahn, were relieved of their responsibilities earlier this week. Reinsdorf wrote a statement saying, quote, "This year has proven very disappointing for us all on many levels." That, of course, led him to make changes in the baseball department leadership. In an attempt to recover from the Dylan Mulvaney debacle, Bud Light has launched its 30-year sponsorship of the NFL season through an ad campaign dubbed Easy to Sunday. With the substantial erosion of market share and encountering financial setbacks, the brand is committed to regaining its former prestige. You're watching the ad portraying normal, everyday American football fans tailgating and watching football as Bud tries to resonate with a relatable audience. Bud Light's ill-fated Mulvaney association and the nationwide boycott after has resulted in disastrous sales and the slashing of jobs. Anheuser-Busch has lost more than $395 million in U.S. beer sales, industry experts predicting that Bud Light might actually permanently lose 25% of its previous market share. Last month, Anheuser-Busch InBev revealed a 2% downsizing of its workforce, affecting about 18,000 employees. Bud Light was the #1 beer in the country just 5 months ago, but it's currently ranked 14th. And that doesn't seem to matter to the NFL's commissioner, Roger Goodell, the Washington Commanders, or the owners of FedEx Field, who continue to embrace the financial sponsorship from Anheuser-Busch. Well, it is a critical time for America's senior citizens. In fact, many people are struggling to make ends meet under Bidenomics. Plus, a significant part of society just doesn't think that elections are fair and free. And that's why many retirees, especially conservatives, are looking for someone to represent their interests. Last year, AARP spent more than $13.6 million on lobbying. But there's an alternative to the AARP that's focused on conservative values, and that would be AMAC. AMAC believes in and stands up for the values that have made America so great. Things like sanctity of our Constitution, fighting reckless government spending, and the ever-expanding scope of federal government. Joining us now is AMAC spokesman Robert Charles to talk more about the group's mission. Robert, good morning.
Terrence, it's a real pleasure. Happy to be with you here.
It is always a pleasure. Good to see you. So I want to start talking about the big story, really, of the day. President Trump arrested, that mugshot. Just from your perspective personally, or even from an organizational perspective, what was kind of your visceral, your immediate reaction to that?
Well, you know, Terrence, even though I'm currently the spokesperson for AMAC, I was a Ninth Circuit U.S. Appeals clerk, and I was a litigator. And to me, this all represents, and I'm sorry to use the words, but it really represents an abuse of prosecutorial power. This is not what we do with our justice system. We don't arrest former presidents in the middle of a presidential election cycle. And I have a lot of opinions about these indictments on the law, but the bottom line is that mugshot sort of codifies, to me, the notion of the abuse of power by this administration. And of course, it's not just an administration, Terrence. In many ways, I think this is an ideological movement trying to separate us from the core values that this country was founded on, that AMAC fights for every day. And they are values like the First Amendment's free speech and freedom to worship, the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms, the Fourth Amendment right to be secure in your homes and papers, the Fifth Amendment rights to due process and equal protection, the Sixth Amendment right, all of these, fair trial, the 10th Amendment, everything goes back to the states and people that isn't expressly given to the federal government. So a big part of AMAC is really looking at how do you protect the sovereignty of the people at the state legislative level, at the federal level, and how do you really turn back the dial so that people can get back to living a normal life where girls are girls and boys are boys, and late-term abortion is something that people don't really subscribe to, and our country is solvent and secure, and our borders are secure. All of these are things that AMAC fights for. So in a way, that mugshot to sort of put a sock around a basketball here, that mugshot codified in many ways the notion that this is not the country that it was just a few years ago, and we need to protect what we've got and get back what we've lost.
And I would imagine that's what many of the members of AMAC are pushing for. They want someone to fight for them. They want someone to lobby on their behalf for a country that they basically have paid their life savings into, and they're not seeing the return that they expected.
You're absolutely right. So I would say roughly 35% of America is over the age of 50. And this organization, AMAC, AMAC.com, you can do AMAC.com/voice and become a member for about $1.25 or so a month. It's an organization that is out there on the ramparts every single day fighting. They're in D.C. trying to make sure that we've got a secure Social Security system. They're fighting for Medicare. They're but they're also fighting for things like the solvency of the country. And right now we've got a $32 trillion debt. We have an administration and a Congress, by and large, that doesn't seem to think that overspending is a problem when the average American is just struggling to make ends meet. My past includes some work in economics, and the gist is that we've got high inflation because of this administration. They shut down a big chunk of the energy sector, which immediately spiked prices for everything from oil to gas to natural gas. They then turned around and overspent by trillions, $6 trillion in the first year and a half. They overspent, which drives up, you have too few dollars chasing, you have too many dollars chasing too few goods. That's inflation. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you've got the Fed that turned around and responded to that inflation by raising interest rates. And we have interest rates that are at 20, 25-year highs right now. So all of that makes life unaffordable. At the grocery store, when you're working on a fixed pension, when you have a 401k or a SEP that is working on dollars that you earned years ago when those dollars were worth 100 pennies, and now they're worth about 80 pennies. And if we wait another year or two, they'll be worth 70 pennies. And that's not the world we want to live in. We want to live in a stable, solvent, really Reagan-esque in many ways world. And they often say that Ronald Reagan was elected on 6 words: strong defense, lower taxes, smaller government. And of course, he had a very good moral compass and was self-deprecating in his good humor. And at the end of the day, we need leadership like that. And I think AMAC in many ways represents the legacy of Reagan. It's the idea that America matters. These rights matter. Solvency matters. Our grandchildren and those that follow us matter. And we have to live up to our time. We have to be equal to our time, Terrence. And that's what AMAC tries to do every day of the week.
Robert, we've talked about some really big, lofty issues that are national issues. But there are some people who say, you know what, all politics are local politics. And there are probably lots of your members who want to just get engaged on the local level. What kind of opportunities are there in that respect?
This is why I love this organization. I came to this organization voluntarily after having been Colin Powell's Assistant Secretary of State. I could have done a bunch of things. This organization is very active at the local level. There are more than 2 million members. And if you want to be a delegate, if you want to be a voice at your local legislature or in moving policies at the state level, they've probably turned back 16 or 18 bad laws in the first 6 months of this year. And they've advocated good laws at the state legislative level. So there's tremendous room. You can be a delegate. There are these delegate organizations. They have meetings. They have constant engagement with their local legislators. And at every level, I mean, they're trying to register the voice of the average American. And in many ways, AMAC, it sounds strange to say this, a big organization, 2 million people, but it's like a big family. I mean, it's a lot of people that tend to believe that America really matters, that we can recover the future, the things that we've lost. The magazine that comes out every 6 weeks has unbelievable interviews. I interviewed Tim Scott about 6 weeks ago, just an incredible Reagan-esque candidate. They don't favor a particular candidate, but they give lots and lots of candidates room to talk and to talk about what matters to them. And I think one of the things that we are missing is the education of the rest of the country that sort of sits on their backsides, trying to educate them and understand that this is a very important moment in American history. We are either going to stand up, speak up, and defend the rights that were handed down to us, sacred rights, God-given rights, or we're going to lose them. And there are countries all over the world. I traveled the world for Colin Powell. I was in, Iraq, Afghanistan, Kosovo, Colombia. There are lots of countries in the world that do not have the rights we have. And if we think that they just exist in a sort of in the ether, we're wrong. Because right now you've got an organization out there, a movement, trying to consolidate power and take these liberties away from average Americans. And AMAC fights every single day intensely. And again, I would encourage people to go to amac.us/voice, and you will find for absolute sure that you're getting your money's worth, and you get all the economic discounts. There are other big seniors groups, and AMAC, of course, gives you all the same kinds of economic discounts. Again, your first economic discount will pay for the entire year's membership.
All right. We appreciate the time, and I'm always on board with a little discount somewhere. By the way, I appreciate the fact that you name dropped and country dropped in one interview. That's impressive, my friend. That was impressive.
Terrence, thank you.
Thank you. Have a great weekend. Well, folks, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have a story that reminds us of just how wonderful America really is. Plus, we'll have your answers to our America's Voice question of the day. One of the wonderful things that makes America America is our desire to help others during times of need. An 8-year-old Nancy Nemi was lost in Porcupine Mountains Wilderness State Park while he was camping with his grandpa and his 3 uncles after going to get firewood. The men actually searched for a long time before realizing that they needed to call for help, and when they did, well, almost 300 volunteers showed up to help find the little one. After 2 days of being lost and sheltering under leaves and branches for warmth, Nancy was found just 2 miles away from the campsite. He was a little dirty and hungry, but safe and uninjured. He was relieved to have been saved from the cold Michigan woods, and the community of helpers shows you that fellow Americans are always quick to come together when needed.
I heard people yelling my name, and I saw a lime green thing hanging. And then I saw somebody. I ran straight to them.
While the park being over 60,000 acres, we're relieved that Nancy is home and safe thanks to the wonderful Americans that saved him. And that's what makes America so great and so wonderful. All right, time for your America's Voice question of the day. Here it is. What do you think about Trump's mugshot? Virginia Price says, I think it's a great photo of him. Lynn Bowen writes, he looked determined. Jonathan Smith chiming in, really keeping it simple. He shows our outrage. And Margaret Sviatko writes, love Trump. Daniel Evans chiming in with Trump 2024, and a lot of people think this is what's going to put him over the top. Amanda Felicia Benedict saying, love it. It shows his resolve to continue on and on. His ex-post was excellent. Claire Wilson writing, love it. He looks like the American eagle, ready to bring down his prey. God bless this man. God bless America, Trump 2024. And Mark and Sally Gruber, I don't know if they're related to Steve Gruber, but they chimed in anyway. Great campaign photo, helped drive home the point that he's in the way of the uniparty's plan for us. Patrick Bergeron writing, watch out, revenge on the way. And Delwyn Manley chiming in with, he will win. Finally, Rick Wilson, we appreciate you chiming in as well, writing, can't wait to see Biden. Speaking of Joe Biden's mugshot, he's hoping that there will be a Joe Biden mugshot. Well, that's going to do it for this edition of America's Voice Live. I'm Terrence Bates. Have a wonderful weekend, everyone. We'll see you back here on Monday. Steve will be back then. Take care.